Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Birthday Cake for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes, and for episode 58, we're chuffed to feature an interview with Chris Summerlin and Joe Thompson of Hey Colossus. Formed when yours truly was still in short trousers, Hey Colossus have been ripping it for 20 plus years, in that time featuring shape-shifting lineups, at one point even featuring a guest turn from the late Mark Lanegan on their 2020 album Dance's Curses. Outside of the band, or rather parallel to the band, Joe and Chris also run Wrong Speed Records. Bloody hell, that's a mouthful. A truly DIY label that's put out records from Hey Colossus alongside the likes of Big Break, Objections, and Colossal Squid. In February 2026, Hey Colossus released their latest album, Heaven Was Wild, their 15th studio album, and one which the band have said felt like therapy. We caught up with the pair over Zoom at the start of 2026 to talk about the latest Hey Colossus record, as well as working with Mark Lanegan, comparisons to Billy Idol, being influenced by Glenn Danzig, and the DIY ethos that keeps them ticking. We start, however, with some technical issues, including an unexpected snippet of Talksport. If you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform and follow Birthday Cake for Breakfast on all the socials. Right, on to Hey Colossus. Enjoy.
Oh, fuck.
You're right, Joe.
Hello? No.
We can hear you.
Got muted it. Audio settings. No, it should all be working.
Can you hear us, Joe? I'm guessing not. You all right, Chris?
Yeah. It's all right. Yeah.
Is this a regular fixture?
Us not being able to work technology. Yeah, it's pretty much every single fucking thing that we ever do is like this.
Hello?
At the moment, it being the month of January, transfers and all of that.
What the
Alex,
fuck are you doing
good
now?
on the show. Alex, good morning to you, mate. And I know you are busy, and I know you're all over the Conor Gallagher first story. Tell me more.
I'm gonna have to stick that in the podcast, by the way, the bit about Talksport, because that's too funny to not have.
What about now?
Yeah,
Is it working?
Can you hear
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I can now. Right. Don't hurt yourself. We're in. We're
Right, good.
right, let's get Talksport back on.
in.
How are you both? Nice to see you. Is it a hectic start given the audio? Are we both well? Where do we find you?
I'm in Bishop's Castle, Shropshire, in the middle of a building site. There's just over the out of sight, over the top of the laptop lid, are two men fitting a wooden floor to my house that I'm not in. I'm in my garage and they're in the house fitting the floor. Yeah, really good fun.
Perfect.
Joe's had this for about a year now.
Joe, the first postman on the podcast, as far as we know. So a pleasure to have that job role on the podcast out of all the ones we've had.
Is it really a pleasure for you? What other jobs have people done? What did the fella from Jethro Tull do?
Well, I don't know if you've heard it, but he talked at length about everything he does in minute detail. But yeah, he's very meticulous, that guy.
Is he not a postman?
No, unless he was when he was a youth. But no, I don't think he delivers post. No, we've had all sorts, but I think you're the first Royal Mail worker.
17 years.
So I was listening to this one. I can actually include you in, Chris. I was listening to Dance's Curses yesterday and completely forgot, because of the period that album came out and there was so much going on, that Mark Lanegan featured on it. How was that whole process, with Mark Lanegan and just getting him involved in that record? It must seem, number one, ages ago, but it must also seem just crazy that even was something that you got together.
Well, I wasn't. I can tell you how I heard it for the first time. We did it as an instrumental. We always do instrumentals, and then we work out well, at the time we did, and then we would just whittle away. Paul would just whittle away at the words, and we'd hear them as they get done. That one was a bit more of a kind of I don't know. I felt that was going to be quite challenging for anybody to sing over, and I was at work secretly checking my emails. No one from my work's going to listen to this, but I was secretly checking my emails, and Joe said, "Check this out. Here you go." Sent it over, and I don't even think that Joe said who was singing on it. and I put my headphones in secretly at work, and it played, and I went, fucking hell, really loud. And sort of gave the game away. But I don't really know how it came about. Joe's the person to ask how that came about, because it's Joe that had the relationship there via email, I think. Is that right, Joe?
I've said this before, but because I do all of the mail order for the band pretty much, or historically have done on and off, despite other labels occasionally tucking in, I've done a lot of the mail order from the very beginning. And he was just buying records from the very beginning. So we struck up a conversation maybe 10, 15 years ago, just back and forward, just him sending emails and me sending emails. And then this song appeared. And I think it's reasonably fair to say that he was ideal for it, rather than anyone else was unideal for it. So I sent it to him, and that was that. And he just went and did it, with a bit of back and forward. But that's how we ended up with that song in the state that it was. Legend.
He seems very straight, doesn't he, in his approach, not just musically, but I read his book and it seems very like he does what he wants, and if he wants to do it, he's going to do it. And that seems very much like that was the approach here. And he was just, yeah, on board from the get-go, Joe.
Yeah, well, he recorded it and sent it back within days, and then we had a bit of a back and forth about it, and we said could he try something different, and without even like batting a virtual eyelid, he did. Like, and a few days later, he sent back a second version without any problem, not charging us anything, pure enthusiasm.
I think he did it on his birthday. I think he recorded the vocal on his birthday. They're Paul's words. Paul wrote the words and sort of mapped it out for him. I think somewhere on Paul's hard drive there's a version where Paul is impersonating Mark Lanegan, so it's possibly good in a way that we didn't really meet him, because I think it might have been offensive to listen to from Mark Lanegan. But like Joe said, he was completely on board with it. I find that incredible that you can direct someone how to do something like that, if someone of his sort of size, and he does it with enthusiasm and good grace. So, I kind of can't believe it happened.
I don't know what you'll both think of this, and Chris, I'll start with you. But listening to the new record, Heaven Was Wild, and we'll talk about it a lot more, I'm sure. But I did get like, some early Queens of the Stone Age feelings from it. And I'm sure they're maybe not a touchstone for you both. I don't know, but they did feel like very, like rated R, let's say, vibes across the new album. Not so much older stuff, but the new one. I don't know what your thoughts were on that, whether that was anything.
I really like that record. I think Rated R is amazing. And I think around that time, they were a sort of band where you felt they could do anything. And for a band like ours, where there isn't it's not a master plan. We're not sitting down. We're not doing anything by committee. We're not making decisions. We're just doing it because of the way the band works. But I think that's almost like a sort of a dream situation to be in, where you're a band that is not confined by what a genre or what people expect of you, and you could just do anything you want. And that's what I think those early Queens records sort of feel like. I know Tim, who's one of the other guitarists, really likes the first couple of Queens records as well. I think it's sort of unavoidable, isn't it, in a way, to those records, and I don't know how much of a sort of reference point they are for Paul as a vocalist, but I certainly like those records. I think that's a compliment. I take it as a compliment anyway.
I mean, you can never tell because like you say, those first couple of records, definite, but people may not have stuck with them over particularly the last couple of albums. But yeah, I wasn't too sure whether Paul would like the idea that there were at times where I thought he sounded a touch like Billy Idol on the vocals.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure how he'd react to that. But,
Yeah. No, I don't think you're the first person to bring up Ian Astbury, Billy Idol, or I think that was definitely touched on when we were making the record with enthusiasm. I don't think I wouldn't take that negatively.
Yeah, it's not something I would possibly have said to his face, but now it sounds like something that maybe wouldn't be too unenthused about hearing. So Joe, with the records, Heaven Was Wild, it'll already be out by the time this goes out. You've put out many records, not just the Hey Colossus record, but loads under Wrong Speed, your label. Is that feeling of being a month out from release still a daunting one, when it comes to your own record, particularly, after how much time has passed since the previous record and such? Does it still feel like a daunting prospect, or is it kind of like business as usual?
Well, for the record, we both do the label, both Chris and I, not
Of
just me.
course, yes. Yeah, sorry, I did mean, the both of
Um,
you, but yeah.
my thing with like releasing records now is I think you get a 6 week window to push a release. Now, historically, I would say pre 2000, that 6 year window, 6 week window, sorry, was after the release. So when a release come out, you would really push it then. But since the advent of onlineness in such a big way, that 6 week window is now before the release. So you get like a hectic time before, and the album's out on the 27th of February, right? And everyone, you can, I think, even from the very biggest label down to the smallest label, the drop off post release can be quite dramatic, where people are like, right, that's out. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. So at our level, where we have no one doing PR and whatever, we have to put in a little bit of a hands-on shift to make sure that everyone's aware that the album's there, in a way that if we were a big label like XL or whatever, they would be putting thousands of pounds into this. So you have to put a bit of a shift in to keep this like 6 week run up quite interesting, knowing that there's a bit of a cliff hanging sort of in March for it. For me, it's quite a challenge, probably for both of us. It's quite a challenge to come up with ways of making this 6 weeks be interesting. So we had that little documentary made just as something different, and then we put it out on Christmas Day because we knew that the music industry, as people know it, shuts down over Christmas. So it was a way for us to try and find a fresh way in to keeping this time interesting. It is a bit of a challenge, I think. I don't know what the question was now. I've rambled this much, but it was probably around that.
I sort of agree. And what's weird is if you're doing the label, normally when you do in 20 years ago when someone else was putting out records that we were both involved in, I don't know how you feel about this, Joe, but it almost feels like when you deliver the master and the artwork, there's a really nice little lull there, isn't there? There's nothing you can do, right? Maybe you book some gigs or something, but there's nothing you can really do. Now it's like, okay, brilliant, I got my band head on and the master's delivered and everything's great, and that's like, all right, now me and Joe have got to work out what to do next. And it sort of feels a little bit relentless in a way, but I'm not complaining about that. It's good. I kind of like the energy of it. But yeah, like Joe said, how do you make it? How do you make people pay attention if you haven't got a huge budget on it and it is just doing daft things like putting a documentary out on Christmas Day or making it go on sale at 1 minute past midnight on New Year's Day just because we kind of find those things and they perversely amusing or something. It's not what the industry should do, but we're not part of the industry, so
I'm certainly not complaining either, and I actually really enjoy it, and I really enjoy doing it for other bands as well. Each release you do, you have to try and come up with a different way of making it interesting, and that can be anything from making it quite a hands-on sort of art product, sleeve-wise and whatever else that can make it interesting for people, or you've got a whole load of live videos to release, or there's different releases have different things that can be done for them. And I find it really intriguing and interesting coming up with ways to make them land, because you don't want to be putting time and effort into something for someone and making an arse of it. And you don't want that act, band, solo person to walk away thinking, well, they didn't do much. That was a disaster. So there's all sorts of pressures isn't the right word, but let's just use it. Pressures coming from various places to make the whole thing just not suck from start to finish.
From a label standpoint, and I suppose from an artist standpoint as well, start on you, Chris, like how do you feel you can combat that 6 week drop off, once the record's released? I know we've just said, Joe, you've just said about, you build up to it rather than build up after it's been released. But is there a way, do you think, of keeping that momentum, or is it just as much as you can do to get that build up to the record release and then just pray for the best, really?
I think you just have to hope that something lands with people and there's an interest in it. And then that almost, I mean, Dance's Curses you were talking about there, that seemed to, by no design of ours, just keep reigniting it, having an interest reignited every so often. And so it was almost like, well, this is easy. We're masterminds of this, but we're not. We're just it's just kind of luck. But I think that from our perspective, all we can really do is try and tell people about what we're involved in, whether it's our own band or other bands, and for our voice to be an honest one, you know. So we're trying to say there's no hoodwinking going on. We're not snake oil salespeople. We're not trying to like cheat the system, which so much of PR is. So much of sort of promo is about flukes and cheating things and pulling the wool over people's eyes. I think as long as you can just say that only putting out good music is probably a good way of that. Obviously, not everyone thinks everything we put out is good, but we do. And so when we're saying that we think something's good, hopefully our voice is an honest one. And that's why we don't really tend to use PR companies, etc. Not because they're dishonest, but because they've been paid to say the things that they say. So I think for us, it's just, you hope that the music is good enough quality that people have a sustained interest in it. And you hope that they trust what you say. And therefore, maybe if they don't pick up on something immediately, they'll pick up on it later on. A good example, we were just doing a bit of a recap of the last year and the 12 releases we put out. It was interesting to see some of those releases have passed people by, people who are quite sort of loyal to the label, just because of the timing of it or whatever else. It was interesting to see them then go and pick them up. And then they're little pockets of interest and a few sales here and there for records. And that's all we can really do at the level we're at, unless we get into that kind of world of smoke screens and lying and, you know, kind of like the promo world. It sounds like I'm down on it, but I'm not. It's just, that's not the world we're in.
But I also hope that we, because of who we are as people and the people we move with within this like world, are of a similar mind. So if we release a record by someone, a band or whatever, you kind of think that because we're like what we are, that they might back up the release as well, either by doing gigs or just sort of being positive about the whole thing. Because I think that can be, it's a lost art being positive in the modern day 20s. It's really a common thing to do yourself down or be negative. It's easier to be negative about something than positive. People are scared of outing themselves as a positive person. If someone puts a record out with us, I'm hoping that they're positive people and will act accordingly.
I think with Wrong Speed, you know, you could never be accused of not being positive about any of the releases that, you know, you're putting it out. And it's similar in a way. I can't think what they're called these days, but it's similar to how Castleface used to operate. And, you know, you guys have got Learning Curve putting out the new Hey Colossus record in the States. And I would suggest, and, you know, I imagine the answer is definitely going to be the case, but you're working with these people with a similar ethos, and that must be so important, particularly in the scenes that, you know, you run around in, to have those sorts of like-minded people to work with, and that must be so vital to what you guys do.
Yeah, that's all there is. Those networks that, I mean, you know, we're old, right? So those networks have been built up almost by accident. You know, you stick around long enough and you know people. That's all there is really for us, is that network that's there. I think it's a positive one. Sort of Joe was skirting around it there. You know, there are difficult times when you're doing this, and there are difficult times with feelings of not being, maybe the positivity levels aren't quite there. But it's good that you pick up on that and you think that we're positive about everything. That makes me feel we're doing all right with it.
I mean, I think what was said earlier, you know, about the whole fact that PR agencies are paid to promote these records, you know, it does make sense, obviously, the fact that, like you say, that it's nice to be picked up on the positivity because you're not doing it because you've got a manager who's telling you to do it and what have you. Just touching on what you said, Chris, about the age thing, and I'm glad you said it. I was thinking about the record, you know, the production wise, you took this out across 4 sold out London dates in 3 days, and you were tweaking songs for the new record between gigs, like, you know, a stand up might do a work in progress. 4 shows across 3 days sounds great on paper, but for people who are no longer, you know, in their early 20s, how did you find these shows, and how did you find the 11 a.m. sound checks for these shows? Was it a task, or was it, you know, all part of just, yeah, the fun of it?
Oh, I don't know. I can't speak. Joe doesn't booze, and I do. So I can, well, I can say not very heavily anymore, especially not over those 4 days. But I think that the non-drinkers were in the van going back from one of the gigs, and the drinkers, although one of them wasn't drinking, obviously because he's driving, but the more tired members of the band were in a car, And it took the tired members a very long while to get back to where we were going because we were very confused, old, and it was a struggle. But it wasn't that bad. It was good. And also, there's a lot to be said for there being an enthusiastic crowd for what we do. And, you know, I'd love to do that more often. I don't mind doing four gigs in 3 days. It was all right. I'm not sure I could do, what would it work out, 8 gigs in 6 days, but I quite like it. I don't know how you felt about it, Joe. I think it was probably...
I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was one of the best things we've done. And I was, it's something I'd wanted to do for a very long time. And it's quite hard to persuade a whole band and a promoter and people in general that it's a good thing to do because it sounds wild. And I'm sure other bands might have done this, but I've not heard of a band doing it before, like a north, south, east, west in London over the one weekend. And we specifically picked venues that felt achievable. It's not like we were playing Wembley Stadium in the north or, you know, or anything like that. It was like hopefully achievable. And Anthony, the promoter, he did the whole thing. He runs Baba Yaga Hut, and he was kind of immediately into the idea because I think he's kind of keen on stupid things like we are. So we had one promoter doing it. And even about 3 days before the weekend, the Saturday afternoon gig, which was in South London, it ended up in Clapham, but it actually got moved with 3 days to go. And Anthony managed to find a venue with 3 days to go. I don't know. It just felt excellent, alarmingly excellent from all of it. And when we got to Kingston, which was the Sunday afternoon gig, we were playing there, and there were people there who said, like, no one can, you know, Kingston has a good venue, but not many bands, or if they're playing London, they don't play Kingston. If they're playing London, they play the usual. You can imagine the places they play. So there were people there who were like, this is amazing. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we made them all ages, the afternoon gigs. So there were people there with their kids and whatever. I don't know. It was brilliant. It was a lot of fun. And it really, I think, benefited us when it came to recording the album like a week or two later.
And the idea of it benefited you to then record the album in that fashion because you had a bit of a run up in terms of that. If that was a way of working that you could do in future, Joe, like you say, you know, whether you could wrangle 5 other people together with their, you know, lives and such, is that like a desired approach that you would possibly put into moving forward with record production?
If you're asking me, I would say that would be the dream, but I think we all might be surprised, sorry, how many bands, once their first album's done, after that, so many bands record their album before they've played the songs live. First album is one that might have taken quite a while to come up with, and you've played it live and developed it. But very quickly, I think most bands you get records by might not have played those songs live before recording them, meaning that they're better 6 months later. Yeah, I know it from virtually every album we've done since about 2006 or something, that every song on all of those albums is better 6 months later. And if we'd have recorded it then, it would be 10 BPM faster, more confident, and have a slightly longer second chorus.
I think as well, normally, so the last few records, or certainly since I've joined, the way that the music comes about is quite spontaneous. We're all living quite far apart from each other, so just the cost of rehearsing over and over again to record isn't something we can do. So the band is able to make songs up from very, very slight beginnings quite quickly because it's just an affordable way of doing it, and it works amazingly. As a newcomer to it 7 years ago, I couldn't believe how quickly things were going down, being classed as being finished. And they're really good. And I don't think they sound like that. I don't think they sound like aimless jams. You know, nothing on Dance's Curses feels like that, but they were all made that way. But I think this one's a bit of a reaction against that because the last one we chipped away at in a semi-remote way. In Blood, the last record, we sort of had an idea for how it would work to start with that then had to change. And it felt like, I don't think we were all in the same room at any point during the making or mixing of that record. Not that we were doing it remotely, but Paul would do his vocals separate to the band. And I think that benefits some of us, but it certainly doesn't benefit all of us. And this one feels more like an opportunity to say to the people who it didn't benefit as much, actually, there's another way we can do this. And it's the first time I've done stuff with Colossus where the songs were relatively well formed with vocals as well before we recorded. and it just made it a lot of fun. It made the recording a lot of fun. I think, as much fun as a recording can be anyway.
It's interesting, saying that half the maybe not half, I don't know what the numbers were, Chris, but like that some people didn't quite get on with the production as much as the others with the previous record. How do you, other than changing things up, how do you combat that sort of feeling within the group where people might not be clicking as much as they might be if it was a different sort of environment? What's the best approach in terms of the band? I appreciate you're coming into it newer than some of the other
Yeah,
members of the band.
I don't know. I just think obviously you value what everyone does, and you're aware of what their strengths are, or you try to be anyway. And it felt with the last one. I mean, the last album, it was supposed to be, because we started discussing this, and I think that enough time's gone past that I can talk about it. Is that right, Joe? Is that fair enough? It was supposed to be for Mark Lanegan to sing. Lanegan was supposed to be the singer on In Blood. That was the original plan.
Right.
And so we wrote twice as many songs as ended up on that, and we wrote them for him to sing. So we wrote them being quite clear where a verse was and a chorus was, because we know that the person who was singing them isn't going to be in the room with us having those chats. They're not familiar with how we work, so we wanted to keep them quite melodically in a way that we could imagine that person singing. And then what happened. That wasn't possible. And maybe we all just dreamt it. Maybe we dreamt the emails and everything else that we were having, but it did. And we were left with a record that was almost like a sort of tribute record to Northwest American music. That's what it felt like to me. We were writing these songs that we wanted him to sing, and now he's not there to do that. So Paul stepped in and did an amazing job. Like, genuinely, it was better than I thought it was going to be with Lanegan. But that's not a fun way to make a record. You're chipping away at it, and you're crafting it maybe more than maybe I'm comfortable with. I'm sort of have a foot in both camps. I quite like messing around in the studio and taking a while and second guessing things and being a bit of a perfectionist. But I also quite like it to sound good as soon as I hear it back in the moment, and I don't have to do anything else to it. And I felt particularly like with the last record, it didn't make the most of all of our attributes. And I feel like this one, Heaven Was Wild, does do that. I feel it sort of like allows everybody to do what they do as well as they can do, I think. I mean, I'm biased, right? Because I'm in it, but that's what I think.
It must have been bittersweet hearing that. I didn't know that was the case with the record, the previous one. It must have been pretty bittersweet, particularly for you, Joe, having that outcome, given your prior involvements with Mark.
Well, I think it was really sad. Ultimately, it was really, honestly, it was an email friendship we had. It wasn't like, anything more than that. Yeah, and it was just really sad. That was it.
Quick break in the interview just to give you a heads up about some of our previous episodes. From our first episode to our latest, we featured interviews with the likes of Proto Martyr, The Lovely Eggs, Anna Erhard, Chat Pile, The Future Heads, Public Service Broadcasting, Gang of Four, Joshua Idehen, The Jesus Lizard, and even snooker legend Steve Davis. Treat yourself and go back through the episodes. Be sure to tell all your friends and comrades too. Enjoy. With this new record, Heaven Was Wild, I thought there were some interesting press quotes, and as we've talked, well, not press quotes, sorry, press release quotes. And as we've talked, you're very, with Wrong Speed, you're very positive, but also, you're very true to what the record is and where the band's coming from and such. And there were, as I say, two interesting press release quotes that I liked. One being, "This felt like therapy and it was needed." And the suggestion of it being Hey Colossus, but looser and rawer than the band have been in some time. In terms of the therapy, I'll pop to you, Chris, with this one first. Was that personal therapy or was that band therapy? Was it a case of interactions with each other in terms of the approach of like the way it felt, or was this coming off the Lanegan, or was it more a case of just
all of that? I think all of it, and but mainly because I think we went well, like everybody did. I mean, this is not people's personal lives were way worse than what I'm about to describe, but we went from doing what I think is probably the longest tour that the band had done and that was 2019, And then Dance's Curses seemed to go quite well. And it almost was, there's a feeling of like slight effortlessness about that for me. You know, I just joined and all the gigs were good. We did Glastonbury, we did, it's pretty sweet. And then lockdown happened and it was really hard for us to get back up and running again, And again, that's so what in comparison to the world in general, But it felt like we hadn't really been a band for a while. And even when we were making the last one, we weren't really together doing that. We were making it, as best as we could with the circumstances we were in. But it felt like actually the most fun we have is playing live and having a laugh with each other and spending time in each other's company. And that is something that did seem to get forgotten about. And, the band WhatsApp thread heats up and heats up and heats up. And like, really, if you were just having those chats in a room with each other, it'd be fine. And it felt like, it proved to be the case. But I mean, I don't know. I think the therapy line was Joe's in the press release, but that's what it felt like to me. Anyway, that's what I read from that, or I took from that.
I would say that not only are we old, we are also reasonably old school with how we go about, or how we want to go about doing music. That is just playing with other people. It's an excellent way of communicating. It's an excellent way, especially speaking as a male human being, to communicate with other male human beings for a bunch of days, and it be just really good for me and maybe all of us just to be in a room and play. It's as old school as you can get, I realize, and it's particularly probably not very cool in nowadays. I know that there's a studio nearby that I occasionally pop into, and it's run by a friend, Ben, who we've recorded with, and he will say that bands will go in there and the drummer will go in there and then go home, and then the bass player will go in there, record his bit or her bit, and then go home, and they'll all just be in there and there's no, it's a real click track thing. And on this album, there's no click tracks. That's a really old school answer that makes me sound like I'm covered in cobwebs. But I think there's something to be said that if you play a guitar or play drums, you want to play it with other humans. And it's an excellent way to communicate. I've got to let the dog out.
This is now the time to shit talk Joe. No, that's an interesting point that Joe brought up there. Chris, was there any ever thought for you? I'm sure not by the sounds of it, because you're lucky to have the WhatsApp thread, like you say, rather than say a band was doing this in the 80s and may not have such luxuries. But was there any ever thought that, without this method of you all being able to come together, that this might have been different, with you all being so far apart?
I think if we'd have put forward doing it the same way as we've done the last couple of records, I don't think we'd have all been on board with it. I just don't think it would have got done. We did have a little go. There were some songs created between the records, and it felt like it was lacking in that enthusiasm, lacking in that spark, because we weren't all there. I wonder if we hadn't have gone about it this way, whether we'd have done anything really, to be honest. But luckily we did, and luckily everyone wanted to do that, and luckily it did work. And it's very obvious that quite early on when we were doing it, that it was working as well. I mean, it's hard to not blow your own trumpet with it or anything like that, but it did feel like it was really good. It did feel like the experience of making that record was one of my favorite things I've done in music. So it felt like it was a good idea to do that, and maybe a band saving idea potentially, but maybe that's maybe putting I don't know, the others might argue with that.
For you, Joe, you've said that it's old school, and even though we don't put video up, I can put video on this one if you like, just to prove that there's no cobwebs in the vicinity of your room. But you said about dealing with like a bass player, dealing with a drummer and such, and being in each other's company when you're actually making the records and such. So do you think, similar to what Chris said, that this new record might not have got made, or might not have got made any sooner, if you hadn't had that luxury of being together and being able to bounce off each other?
I think that once we'd lit the fuse with the idea of how we were going to do it, which was do the gigs and then record, once that fuse had been lit like 6 months before, it felt like immediately felt quite exciting. And although it's a really old way of working, bizarrely it felt new. So it just seemed to spark ideas quite quickly. Like once we realized that was going to happen, how it was going to work if we hadn't have done this, who knows? But then you could ask that about any band's album ever. If we'd have decided to do something different, would Sergeant Pepper's sound like Sergeant Pepper's? Who knows? But this was perfectly timed for us, and I think we're really pleased with how it's come out because of it. It's when I listen to it, I can hear there's a slight zip to it that I think has come about because of it.
You did a feature for us back in 2020 on influences and inspirations and stuff like that. And vocalist Paul, he of Billy Idol fame, chose a 1 hour video of a vacuum being used because he said it rearranged his tinnitus and filled in the gaps and all the rest of it, which I think, is a brilliant choice. Did any of you have, any of the similar intriguing influences or things that helped you this time around or in general, when it comes to the production, outside of music, or was there any particular music influences that were up there for you?
It doesn't get discussed very often. Music, other bands, other music doesn't get discussed very often amongst us, mainly because of time. We don't have a lot of time hanging out really when we're doing this stuff. We're just making music, and quite often we attribute influences to it after it. We work out what influenced something after we've done it. But I think me and Joe, we both really love a record by a long gone band called Evergreen from Louisville. And that record sounds like, to be honest, it sounds like they probably could have done with another couple of gigs on their weekender just before they got ready to do it, right? They're kind of, it's on the very edge of, it's easy in both of our top tens, I think. And it was something that we discussed quite a lot when we would do it. We know we're not going to sound like another band. It's always going to sound like us. But just the fact that we shouldn't, or the approach that we shouldn't be too picky about it. We shouldn't be too perfectionist about it. We should try and make everyone like a featured soloist. So if you got Bob or whatever, or Tim, and they're going to do something that's particularly Bob or Tim like, and it isn't tasteful for the song, turn it right up, right? Make it the loudest thing. So there's a lot of that going on in it. There's a lot of, and I feel like that's, it's a musical influence. It's not necessarily a band, but it's to do with an embracing of accident, serendipity, and stuff that maybe we hadn't done before. But I'm trying to think of things we did talk about, music we did talk about. Definitely talked about Danzig and the Associates, I think. But that Evergreen record, I think, is the one that, as a methodology to make music, that was one that we certainly talked about.
And just a nerdy note, that Evergreen record, which you should check out if you can, was recorded by him from LCD Sound System, whatever that guy's name is, the main fella in that, back in the day.
James Murphy, yeah. There's a couple of good bits in that where you can, if you listen in and you got headphones on, you can hear the singer doing quite audible bong rips between every single line he sings. But it's just like it's the perfect halfway point between like Discord, like punk rock, and the Rolling Stones or something, like that kind of like, well, that wasn't so, that song's not good. Do another take of it, and then you hit the miracle groove for one take, and you got it. And it's such a great record for it.
It's the teetering on the edge. There's something about teetering on the edge. I have this reasonable theory that the best take you'll ever do is the one before you're 100% with a song. So when you get to about 90% of knowledge, like if as a bass player or a guitarist, whatever, if you're like 90%, then you're going to be slightly anxious and slightly sort of, I don't know, overly aggressive or something. And you just capture it just shy of it. And that Evergreen album is one of them where they really caught it just shy. Every single song is probably 80%. But there's magic in that though. There's magic in not over rehearsing.
I was going to say 90% for us. I think that's like ultimate dream is 90%. I think some of the ones on the new record are maybe 40% for me on a couple of them. But it's fine.
Just turn you right up, Chris.
That's what we did. Honestly, that was the approach. There's one song we didn't put it on the album. Actually, it came out as a Halloween single, called Hey Zombie because we couldn't fit it in. We couldn't really make it work in the album. There's a bit in that where everyone takes a guitar solo, and it's like Bill and Ted Wild Stallions. Like it's like the key of N or something. It's so bad. And so the only way you can really deal with that is just turn them all up as loud as I go and see what it sounds like. So I quite like, it felt like a refreshing. We were quite tasteful on the last record. It felt quite refreshing to do that.
So where does, I'm guessing also possibly vocals, because it does get a wee bit heavy gothy at times on the new record. So where does Danzig come into it? Or was it the way were you all topless in the studio or?
It just, Paul won't allow us to be in his presence when he's doing vocals. He won't allow us to have eye contact. No, I think we all quite like Danzig. I think we were talking, I don't know why we were just talking about it. And there's one song in particular that has that ever so slight spiritual metal sound to some of it. I'm not going to say which because it might ruin it, but there's a couple of lines on one of the songs that feel like they've got that. And we questioned it. Everyone questioned it. Paul questioned it when we did it, and we decided that it was faithful to the spirit of the record to just go with it. But I think that's when Danzig got discussed.
The bit that you're talking about, and I know the bit. I won't say what it is either. But as we were leaving the studio, because we went in for 5 days, we recorded in Bruton in a room that we really like, which is in Somerset, and we got a couple of fellas down from Nottingham to help who run JT Saw venue and recording place in Nottingham. They came down and recorded us. So they were there for 5 days. On day 5, 5 minutes to go, and everyone had packed up, I went back into the room and got them to play the last minute of that song again, because I knew that I wouldn't hear it again for a while, like in that room, and like the mixing thing was going to happen, and there was going to be some time. And I went back in there and made them play that one bit again because it's absolutely perfect. It's the best thing. It's so good. And I love the first solo. It's not a solo because I know it's a band, but the first Danzig album with like Chuck Biscuits on the drums and whatnot, absolutely incredible.
I remember someone asking at the pub once, they were like, what is it about this Danzig guy and the Misfits? And it was like, it's like Halloween music and it's all spooky, but it's great. And he's very macho, but he's about 5'2" and strange, but very, very enjoyable. Yeah.
He writes good songs as well, Glenn Danzig. There's a Papa M, David Parho, Danzig Misfits covers LP where he just plays those. Yeah, he plays those songs on an acoustic guitar, but I don't think he rearranges like the guitar part to make them sound sad. He's just playing them on an acoustic guitar. So you start to suddenly realize that those songs are quite like Last Caress has got quite sad chords to it. The lyrics are perhaps less sophisticated, but that makes it good. Yeah. I feel like we spoke about other things other than Danzig, but yeah, Danzig positive, the recording.
So I appreciate, Chris, that you've come into it late. Joe, you've been there, I've assumed from the start, but Hey Colossus, 20 plus years now. What keeps the longevity going with that? I mean, we could start with you, Chris, in the sense of coming into something that's already been, reasonably established. What do you think's kept it going so long? And then Joe, from there.
I mean, every band gets compared to the band I'm going to mention here, and I'm not comparing us to that. But if you look at The Fall or something, it is just the lineup changes. And what you're doing when you change the lineup is giving yourself a new problem. You're giving yourself like a challenge to get over. As a fan of the band before I joined, there's really clear stages of the band that are marked out by somebody joining who didn't fit in with what it sounded like before, and then it changes. And I don't think none of that's thought out in advance. It's just rolling with it because it moves so quickly. You're always like, you're strapped to the front of the ship. You're not like steering it. You're just going with it. I find that quite inspiring. And I found that when I joined, I really found it a challenge to accept that what I'd played in the room was right. I like to work stuff out and then take it away, do 50 guitar overdubs, really milk it, really have my, and it was quite a challenge for me to move away from that. But I think that is what, like we were talking about with the therapy question, the interaction between the band members isn't really done. It doesn't feel like it's complete. There's always something new to work out there. And when maybe, changing lineups between Dances, Curses, and In Blood gave us, the rest of us, a new challenge. It's like, how are we going to accept? How are we going to integrate the new people in that now? How's that going to work? And that's what it feels like to me. It's like there isn't really enough time to work out what's going to happen next. It's like it's happening. You know, we weren't working out with this record what's it going to sound like, or what does it mean? Where you know, what does it mean in the history of the band? It's like I'm having those thoughts at the 90% knowledge moment that Joe was just talking about as the take ends, wondering whether I got it right or not. And that's, to me, is like a really good way to make music, and something that I would miss if I wasn't doing it.
I really don't know. I don't have an answer. Honestly, it wasn't meant to be, and it is, and that's it. I just love it.
I imagine you'd get similar, to be fair, if you asked Marky Smith. I did think, Chris, you were going to say that the one band that you didn't want to compare yourselves to was the Misfits for some Danzig related reason. But yeah, so I mean, it must feel wild / also kind of business as usual to be putting out the new record and just having it out there, because it kind of is, like you say, Joe, it is what it is, and it's, yeah.
I guess I said it in the little documentary thing that we made, but just so bear with me if I'm repeating myself. But we're all like aware that time is ticking, and if you're not doing stuff, to me, it feels like time is ticking emptily, and I kind of like time to tick a bit noisily. So either be doing the label or this band or any other music thing that any of us are involved in. I just think it's really important to have your mind being used in a way that's creative, if possible. And I know that not everyone's musical, but you could be someone who designs a website and does a podcast for that website. And I think it's really important for you to have spent time thinking about it and creating your thing. And it's important for an artist to do the same. And I just think it's really important to have a bit of your head used up in a way that isn't just thinking about your job and cooking your spag bowl in the evening. I think that it's really important. So that's what, for me, that this is just one of the many things I find really important to do for my own head.